Great. Thank you all so much for coming here. This is honestly my favorite time of the year, getting everyone to come out here. And it's especially exciting this year because this is our 10th anniversary of the eCTF. This is 10 years of the eCTF. We started, quickly overview. We'll start with a little bit of competition overview, have a speaker, a number of teams presenting, one more speaker, we'll have a break, and then we'll have the last teams present before the award presentation. So this year is especially exciting because it's 10 years into the eCTF. We started in 2016 at humble beginnings of just 4 teams. We had Northeastern University, University of Massachusetts Amherst, University of Connecticut, and here, my alma mater, Tufts University. In 2017, actually, I was a competitor in the eCTF. And in fact, the second window right there was the top of the stairwell where I was sitting at 5 a.m., as many of you are well familiar, trying to get our design in, submitted to the handoff. So I know exactly what you all have been through. And I've also got to see how much it's grown since there, from 10 teams in 2017 all the way up to 139 teams this year. We have more teams in the attack phase this year than we had teams just 3 years ago. So thank you all for making this possible. It's impossible without you. Also, a big thank you to all of our sponsors. So the NEMC Hub, which is funded by CHIPS Act and Mass Tech, they're a big contributor to the eCTF and wouldn't be possible without them, as well as our corporate sponsors, CrowdStrike, Rolls-Royce, Sysdig, Fortinet, and supporters Analog Device and Boston Cybernetics. Another round of applause for them, please. This slide gets harder and harder to make every year. It's now getting to the point where, this is basically an eye test for even if you're sitting up close. But we have 139 teams competing, which is incredible. I couldn't even imagine growing to this size. We have dozens of new teams, as well as our 4 original teams that have competed almost every single year since the first year. And a special shout out to our 2024 winner last year, Carnegie Mellon. They're currently on 3 consecutive wins, which is tied for the most consecutive wins in the eCTF. Where's Dennis? Dennis was at Northeastern, which is currently is tied with 3 consecutive wins. So for those who aren't, most of you are familiar, but for those listening in and who aren't familiar, the eCTF is a capture the flag competition, but it's structured a little bit differently. Rather than your traditional attack-only Jeopardy-style competition where teams are solving problems, the eCTF is broken into 2 different major phases, stretching across 3.5 months. So starting in January, teams started designing and building a secure embedded system to meet certain goals. They had to meet functional requirements and security requirements that I'll talk about in a second. Once they finished their design, they can move on to handoff, where they submit their designs to us to be tested and verified functionally. And then they get to the fun part, where the attack phase, where they're attacking not pre-canned challenges, but the designs of other teams, trying to capture flags and prove that they can defeat security requirements of other teams. This year, teams were tasked with designing and building a secure satellite TV system. The system had to have an encoder that could take raw TV frames and encode it and make it secure, and then a decoder that running on a microcontroller that took those encrypted frames and printed them out to a TV for view. This is a relevant challenge. There's attacks on satellites that are happening more and more frequently. Embedded systems are becoming more and more prevalent as they infiltrate every single part of our daily life. And this is not just a theoretical competition, but it's something that is done in the real world as well. The platform teams were using was the analog NAC 78,000 feather boards, which now you are probably more familiar than you would like to be with. They have a nice little microcontroller with an ARM processor and a little RISC-V coprocessor. and a good amount of flash and RAM, but they provide, for those of you who's first time working with embedded systems, might be the first time you've worked on an embedded system, running bare metal, no operating system, you have to do everything yourself. So that little Max 78,000 board is that little decoder board there. That is what's running for every team the system. Oh, the animation started right away. So the encoder goes and encodes frames and sends them out over the satellite to be taken by that hardware Max 78,000 board, decoded and displayed on TV. Teams had to meet certain security requirements. The attacker shouldn't be able to decode the TV frames without a valid decoder. You don't want people reading and pirating the TV that you should be paying to subscribe. Second, the decoder should only decode valid TV frames generated by the satellite system that the decoder was provisioned for. You don't want some pesky neighbor coming in and putting up whatever TV frames on your TV that they would like. And finally, you shouldn't be able to reorder frames and go back and forth and show old frames. It should only be showing the current frames that are being displayed and encoded. In the attack phase, this is the setup that teams had. So they had their own decoder that was validly provisioned for the system. There was a live satellite that was encoding frames in real time for every single TV and allowed teams to pull down raw encoded frames and try to decode them. They had channels to capture flags if they had a subscription for channel 2, but that subscription was expired. So if teams were able to read from channel 2, that showed that they were able to get around a valid subscription. Second, if they have on channel 3, they have a channel 3 that is known, and they have a subscription for, but not for their decoder. So we don't want someone to be able to take a subscription for their decoder and sell it on the internet to give everyone free channels. Finally, they had a channel 4, which had no subscription. And this is the ultimate defeat of, if you have no information about this channel, are you still able to read off and get free TV from it? Next, there was a scenario where they got a recording of frames on channel 1, which they do have a subscription for, but that subscription had expired. So you don't only want to be able to decode frames when the subscription is valid. And finally, there's the pesky neighbor scenario where I implied of you get an antenna and you get to shoot whatever frames at your neighbor's encoder that you don't have physical access to. And if you're able to corrupt their channels and cause them to have funky things displayed on their TV, you'll be awarded a flag. So by completing any one of those 5 scenarios, teams were able to capture flags this year. Up next, before we get to the team presentations, I want to invite our speaker. John Petrozelli began his career as an intelligence officer in the U.S. Air Force in 1998 and served in the Republic of Korea in 1999. In September 2001, while supporting C-17 missions, he deployed to Sicily and Germany to support forward operating bases during the initial phase of the U.S. war in Afghanistan. John joined the FBI as an intelligence analyst in 2004. In 2013, John was a day shift intelligence supervisor during the Boston Marathon bombing manhunt and led the computer forensics review of all subjects' digital media. In 2016, he earned a Master's of Science in Information Security from Boston University and became FBI Boston's Chief Security Officer. Before joining Mass Cyber Center, John was the Director of Cybersecurity for Magna5's Boston metro area. He managed the day-to-day operations of the company's Boston Security Operations Center. Without further ado, John.
Thank you, Ben. Hey, everybody. Can you hear me all right in the back? All right, awesome. So I'm John Petrozelli, Director of the Mass Cyber Center. You might say, what does he have to do with NEMC as a speaker? But the Mass Cyber Center is one of 6 divisions of the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative. So we're one of the 6, NEMC is another one of the 6, and I'm also the security officer for the NEMC Hub. So their headaches are also my headaches when it comes to cybersecurity. I'm really excited to be here, though. This is my first eCTF for this, and I'm so excited. I was watching that. It's like so amazing. So I'm so excited to watch all the presentations today. Um, this is an exciting and terrifying time, right, to be in cybersecurity. It's exciting if you win, terrifying if you're on the losing end. And unfortunately, we're constantly under attack. So this today was really cool, like looking at what you were doing, what you've worked on over the past months. And I wanted to just kind of lay out how this works in terms of the real world. You saw one of the articles up there about the Ukrainians at the start of the Ukraine war. The Russians took out their satellite system by attacking their routers and their modems. They also, the technology they were using was called acid rain or dubbed acid rain, which was one of 7 different types of malware, AKA wiperware, that the Russians were using to target the Ukrainian infrastructure. As you may have known, the Ukrainians over time, not only physically, but with cyber, fought back. And in 2024, has anyone heard of Stuxnet? Anybody heard of that? Right? Yes. Okay, I was seeing that. So Stuxnet, for those who don't know, was a type of malware that was introduced into the Iranian system. That was a closed system, most likely introduced by USD or something like that. That oversped the centrifuges and basically knocked the Iranian nuclear program back probably a decade. Well, the Ukrainian groups came up with a version of that called that people dubbed Stuxnet on steroids, called FUXNet. For those who can spell that out. I won't say it here, it's a PG audience. So, but hey, respect for the name, right? So they actually did F the Russians over by knocking out about 87,000 different devices in the Russian industrial control system. But again, do the Russians think that the Ukrainians could do that alone? Probably not. So who do they always blame for stuff like that? Us, right? So what we're seeing is the evolution of cybersecurity not only being a military tool, but a diplomatic tool. And so as wars escalate, you could start to see cyber tools used for diplomatic means. And that's where you all come in this future generations of warfare. If you look at China right now, we have, you've heard probably of all the typhoons, right? There's Volt Typhoon, Silk Typhoon. For those of you who haven't heard of this one, Flax Typhoon. So Volt is targeting the ISPs and the telecoms network. Silk was targeting the treasury and supply chain entities like managed services providers and remote monitoring and management tools. And then Flax Typhoon was targeting IoT devices. So, if you're China, you have 3 different teams, and it's not like maybe the Air Force, Navy, and Army. It's going to be using the best tool for whichever team can deliver that, what you need to get into. So, we've got very sophisticated threat actors that we're working against. And so we need people like yourselves in this generation, in this room to deliver us success over the next decades. So with that, I will just say some tips I would have for those starting their careers or even in the middle of their career or looking to reinvent themselves. And I was talking to some of the teams here, and this isn't just for cybersecurity analysts or cyber wannabes. It's more for anybody here, engineers, up and coming engineers and everything. So hopefully you'll be able to listen to these tips. You heard my bio. I hate when it's talked about here, but I got to where I was because I volunteered for everything and anything under the sun. I ended up sometimes in awful places. I also ended up in like Sicily and Germany instead of right in Afghanistan. So that was, that actually worked out for me. But I also was a POW for a period of time in a notional POW camp because I volunteered for combat survival. However, it helped me when the war started so I could actually do better work to support our C-17 crews when Central Command called and said, you're going to write the combat search and rescue spins for our teams who crash in Afghanistan. Yikes, that was scary, but luckily I had that training. So volunteer for everything you can, because you never know at what stage in life you've done something. Even if it's a crappy job that you don't like, the skills that you get from that job can help you in your next job or help you to move to that next job that you actually want. Immerse yourself in whatever your career is. Become the smartest you can at it, and know the positions around you. I was an intel officer, but I kind of knew how to fly a plane. I definitely knew how to mission plan, and I built combat mission plans for them because I knew that, that type of work. And when I was deployed overseas, I became kind of our tactician, which is typically a spot reserve for a pilot. So, but they said, like, you're the best we have at this point, just get into it. So, again, things I've learned over time have really helped in this position. I already said volunteer for everything. Last thing I'll leave you with is hard work pays off in the long run. Might take a long time of hard work, but it definitely pays off. So thank you all very much for your time. I'm really excited to see this, and good luck to all the teams. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, John. So next, we're going to start to get into the team presentations. So as a reminder, the presentations will be 10 minutes. There'll be someone in the back holding up 5-minute, 3-minute, 1-minute warnings for teams. And then there will be 5 minutes of Q&A. So feel free to think of questions. There will be 2 roaming mics. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. When presenting teams get up here, make sure you pause for a second so we can get a good picture of you, and then we can keep going. So without further ado, I first want to bring up on the stage the City College of San Francisco. This is their 2nd year competing. They are currently in 3rd place on the scoreboard, though none of the scores are final, and the race for 2nd through 4th is very tight. What's really impresses me about City College of San Francisco is this is their 2nd year competing, and they came back swinging after last year. They came back with one of the smallest teams, the smallest team in the top 10, and did an incredible job. So up next, City College of San Francisco.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Christine, and I am joined here by my teammates, John, Liviu, and Anat, and Victor, who cannot join us today. We represent City College of San Francisco under the guidance of coaches Sam Bound, Liz Biddlecombe, and Jonathan Potter. I'd like to start by giving a brief design overview. In our design, all messages are signed and encrypted. We use channel keys to encode frames and device-specific keys to encode subscriptions. Channel keys are only received via subscription. We employed various defensive measures that were successful in protecting against hardware attacks. The main attacks we were concerned about were voltage glitching and power analysis. So our first line of defense was to incorporate random delays to make it harder for attackers to predict when operations will occur. We placed the delays after reading input from UART before any cryptographic operation and before any redundant operation. We duplicated security checks so that even if glitching was successful by chance, it would not succeed twice. Some other measures we took were notable defensive features of ours. First, we used decoy cryptographic operations to confuse power analysis. Second, we made the device wait the maximum allowed time before returning a response in order to eliminate timing information leaks and to slow down attackers. As a distributed team with few attack boards, we need to figure out to work remotely together. John will elaborate.
All right, I'm John, and I'll talk a bit about our infrastructure, which allowed remote control of the Macs and let's see, which one? There we go. And network sharing of the Macs with our distributed team members. It also allowed for automation of some attacks. On the slide is a notional block diagram of our system. There's two of them up there. We started with the suggested Linux setup with the Macs attached via USB. We then added an IoT device, which had relays and MOSFET switches, which are controlled by remote software commands. Those switches in turn controlled USB power to the Macs, which allowed for remote power cycling. And it also controlled the closure of switch 1 on the Macs, which allowed for remote flashing of the device. We also added a real-time video camera so that a human operator could remotely watch the operation of the Macs. Finally, we added an inexpensive USB logic analyzer to read signals from the Macs and display waveforms in real time. The main signal of interest to us was the LED power for timing analysis. Let's see. We later determined it was better to use the Mac's development board to control power to the Mac's attack board. This slide shows the connection between the two. This provided for precise power shutoff of the Macs, which was needed for one of our attacks described later. On this slide, we see the difficulty of soldering onto the Macs. Difficulty of soldering onto the Mac's board. This wire is actually connected to the switch 1, but it's connected to a debouncer chip on the bottom of the Macs. And this was ultimately connected to our remote control system so we could issue commands to reset the device and reflash. More interesting signals on the board are going to be very difficult to solder onto and very difficult to glean information from, but it might be very handy for future analysis. We also created quite a software infrastructure. This allowed for bulk frame downloading for archival and local frame replay to the Macs. These are all in shell scripts and Python. We also had tools to modify frames and subscriptions, creating forgeries, and some quick tests of generic vulnerabilities for the pesky neighbor, for example. And with that, I'll pass on to our next speaker, Liviu.
Hi, my name's Liviu, and I'll talk about attacks. So in the beginning, we were limited to software-based attacks only, primarily cryptographic attacks, using various techniques that we picked up during the competition, as well as a couple of stack disclosure exploits and a barrage of various pesky neighbor attacks that are pretty simple. However, later on, we figured out how to use the MITRE-provided hardware in order to pull off some simple hardware attacks, starting with timing analysis. So first, we noticed that several designs were using only an HMAC for authentication, and they were comparing the HMAC against the correct value using MCMP. The problem with that is MCMP is not constant time. So here's a benchmark that we ran on the development board where we measured the runtime of MCMP as a function of the number of matching bytes. And because MCMP returns early, and because it's optimized to run 4 bytes at a time, we get this nice pattern, which is clearly not constant. So in order to exploit this, we have this hardware setup where we simply connected a GPIO pin from the development board to the resistor connected to the red LED on the attack board. And that lets us precisely measure timing between color changes, which is a proxy for processing time. And so the algorithm that we used is we started with a forgery with an HMAC that was initially all zeros. And then for each byte of the HMAC, starting with the first, we tried all possible values. And then we measured the processing time for each, the time to get an error. And then whichever one was different, we took that as the correct one, and we moved on to the second byte and so forth. And so for some teams, we had to get more complicated. Some teams used random delays, but they were predictable. And then some teams didn't use the LED, so we had to use the UART instead. And because the UART is more noisy, we had to repeat this many times and take an average. But ultimately, this technique, and some variations of it, got us 13 flags. And now to introduce another attack.
I'm Anat, and I'll talk about our second hardware attack, which was glitching writes to flash. When you save data to flash, first, the whole page, if this will go backward one slide. How do I do this? The left? It's not going backwards. Oh, yeah, there we go. Alrighty. The whole page gets erased. That means all the bits will be set to 1, and then the data is written over that in 16 byte blocks. So this is what it would look like if there are 2 subscriptions saved to flash using the reference implementation, which some teams adopted. And in blue, you see the second subscription. Why do we care about that one? Well, that's because in the memory layout, the end time of that subscription sits in the 4th block alone. Now, let's see what happens if we can halt the device after 3 blocks have been written. That 4th block and all subsequent blocks are going to be left as all 1s. And that means that we can set the end time to the maximum possible. So this is the hardware setup we use to accomplish that. It's similar to what we did for timing analysis in the sense that we use a development board as our control board. The difference is that we have an additional wire connecting a GPIO output pin to the RST pin on the attack board. And so when we load the second expired subscription, we wait until the right moment and we ground that RST pin so that the attack board halts and only does a partial write. And so the result is when you reboot the attack board and list the subscriptions, you have a channel 2 subscription valid to the end of time. You could avoid this kind of tampering by saving data encrypted or even simply changing 1 byte at the end of flash, right? Some authentication mechanism, but there were a few teams that didn't do that. So what are the main things we learned from this experience? First, that random delays are essential as a first line of defense. Second, that automation is necessary for first capture bonuses at least. Third, trees. And last but not least, that you don't need expensive equipment to accomplish certain hardware attacks. And with that, we'll move on to Q&A.
Questions? Just raise your hand and someone will bring the mic.
Go ahead.
Hey, I was just wondering what influenced your design choice of using C++ for the design.
Well, with C++, it's much easier to write to the heap instead of the stack, which actually turns out to be vital to defend against a certain other team's attacks.
All right, thank you.
Great presentation. I loved the use of random keys as a decoy. Can you talk about whether you changed key, how frequently you changed that random key, whether it was every boot or every operation, and if you thought about some of the trade-offs there?
Sure. I mean, the random crypto was there just to confuse power analysis, which it turns out not many teams actually did, but it was only changed once per execution. And so we had a PRNG that was initialized with the seed from the TRNG, so it could not be predicted, but the PRNG itself was very fast.
Awesome, thank you.
Hello, for the attack which required like the timing on the flash so that only certain parts of the flash got written to, how do you guys determine that kind of timing? Is it like just trying other timing?
So first of all, writes to flash are actually quite slow, so we didn't need that much precision. But so in addition, we were able to do that against one development board against another development board first to see how much time it took between the start of processing a subscription until it returned, and we could put in debug statements if we wanted to, et cetera. But even if you didn't have that, it wouldn't take you that many tries to actually get this right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, up next, we have, too far. We have Mountain View High School. It is rare to see a high school do well in eCTF. We've really had only one other high school who's also here who has been historically competitive and has gotten to the top 10. It's even rarer to see a first-year high school team make it and do as well as they did. So I've been incredibly impressed with how Mountain View has done this year. So without further ado, Mountain View High School.
Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, for us right now, it's lunchtime. In the West Coast, it's 1 p.m. And also we'd be, it'd be our lunch period in school. I know for many of you, it's been a hot minute since y'all have been to high school, but for us, we're high schoolers. So, it's lunch for us. We're Mountain View High School. That's our school logo, the bottom one. The top one's the logo of a club. And we're a high school that's in Mountain View, California. So I'm Arthur Chow, Ryan Yin, Jeremy Yi, Jaden Stanford, Trent McCauley, and Ryan Cham. Now, who are we? We're high school students from Mountain View, California. And that, if you don't know where Mountain View is, it's around 50 miles south of San Francisco. And it's heart of Silicon Valley, or as our advisor, Mrs. Jennifer Chu says, it's, quote, the heart of Google. Our school is around 2,200 students. The district we have another school in our district, it's around 4,000 students there. So that's us in the top corner. That's our approximate flight path that we use to go from Mountain View to Medford. We actually got here this morning. We took a red-eye flight, so got here at 6 in the morning. 9 hours later, we're here. So we're good students. We don't like to skip school. And the people here are mainly from the Information Security Club, all the people. We're around 100+ member club. We're almost 3 years old. Me, Ryan, and Jaden, 3 years ago, we founded this club, and it's been going really strong ever since. That photo of us is singing parody Christmas carols. All right, this guy. And those are our 2 club logos. And eCTF 2025 is our first time doing this competition. Now I want to start off with a quote from The Art of War. Invincibility lies in the defense. The possibility of victory is in the attack. And that really sums up what we did during eCTF. It's not, how do you? So yeah, our design, we tried to make it as invincible as possible. In fact, we delayed the time we delayed the submission of our design because we found a big flaw in it. And after we fixed it, no one broke into our design. During the attack phase, we went all out. We spent a lot of time. And yeah, and we'll go to design, attacks, and then later we'll have comments.
So like a lot of teams this year, we used a per channel binary tree, which uses a unique key to encrypt every timestamp. But instead of just transmitting every single key, we store it as a binary tree where the child nodes are hashed from the parent node plus some block. So we just chose all 0 bits and all 1 bits. And the reason why for this is that it allows us to reveal the keys economically. So if you have a timestamp in like the bottom from time 4 to time 7, we just need to reveal 1 key. And so the worst case scenario is actually like 1 to 6, where it's excluding the first and the last keys. So that only actually needs 4 keys. And so it's bounded by 2 times the log of it. So that's only about 128 keys, which is actually enough for Flash and our time constraints. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh yeah, for other design decisions, we decided to use Rust because of its memory safety and also because the organizers always backdoor the CN implementation. This year, it actually wasn't so bad. But anyway, the ASCON, we also use the ASCON's hash and authenticated AED encryption model because it's secure and it's good with embedded devices. It's efficient and it's also not a stream cipher, which had a lot of foot guns this year. And so then we use ED25519 to sign all of our packets in order to prevent forgery because of its resistance to side channel attacks, and it's faster on a embedded device compared to RSA or other mod. Okay.
All right, so now we're going to be moving on to the attack phase. So the first attack highlight that we want to point out is this design, and it used a cha-cha cipher, which is an AEAD, and the plain text had a signature with SHA-256, and the plain text included a per channel key, which was encrypted. So what our attack exploited was the fact that the tag from cha-cha was ignored. So what we did was we can just truncate the subscription packet, we can brute force each byte. Sorry, we can brute force each byte of the channel key, and we can just observe the output and check if it's right or wrong. And we do that for all of the keys of the randomly generated channel key. And then eventually we can use a bit flipping attack to mint the correct hash. So some implications of this attack is that if an attacker was given a subscription that has ever been subscribed to a channel, they can read the contents of that channel at any point in time. Also, if the subscription was like posted online, that anyone with access to the subscription could access the channel contents. So how you might combat this attack would be to utilize the cha-cha tag during decryption. Yeah.
All right. Our second, there it is. Our second attack highlight relies on two key facts. One, for every subscription update, this team used the same key and they encrypted it with AES ECB mode. The interesting thing about AES ECB is that it encrypts in blocks, and each block is not dependent on the previous block. So that basically means we can mix and match. If you look at the diagram, we have a valid subscription and a pirated subscription. The only thing wrong with the pirated subscription is that it has a wrong decoder ID. Then we can just copy it over and then we have a valid subscription. And so some impacts, like Jeremy was talking about, if someone were to have a subscription and they just upload it online, everybody could use it. Maybe they could split the cost or something. And then Roku or Netflix or whoever would lose a lot of money, which I guess in hindsight, depending on how you look at it, may or may not be a good thing. But some countermeasures, you can use a different AES version, like a lot of teams use CBC or GCM. And you could also use a signature to ensure it's coming from the right encoder. And then on to Trent.
There were some special attacks that mainly just had to do with details, minutia of the format, some misunderstanding, just a little bit of the implementations. A fairly common one was time channels that were monotonically increasing, but not strictly monotonically increasing. So they would have duplicates of certain things, which was not good. And then other ones where each channel had its own timeline, essentially, which wasn't linked globally, and that also caused problems. And then some people, I don't think, handled the emergency channel exemption properly. And then and this is actually a common thing that we see in industry all the time. Sometimes keys were just left in the code. People hard-coded their keys and accidentally, you hate to see it. But that, of course, allowed us to do some nefarious things, or debug lines would be left in, and that they gave us information we shouldn't have had. But you know, it's a very common industrial mistake. It's not something you like to see, but it happens.
I need some time to talk about the process that we had. So this is the first time we met up in person to do eCTF stuff. We're in our local library. That's 5 of us. And we were I was trying to get the reference flag. So in the bottom left image, you can see that, oh, we got the reference flag. And then the rightmost image is us trying to get the light to flash. We're playing around to try to see how does the board work? How do we get it to flash? And we got it to flash a lot of times. And we met up another time to work on eCTF stuff. On the left, we were at a Taiwanese restaurant. And then after that, we walked to another library to go work on other things. And this is where we made the pivot. We actually had another design originally, but eventually we made the pivot to our current binary tree design due to security concerns. This is my favorite photo. This looks like, look at Ryan. He looks very powerful. So I think it's a very good photo. So this is after we went to get food. We have boba. We have lots of stuff. And this is during March, we got a lot of teams during the session. We were there for around 8 hours. We were very productive. So big group of people, and then we ate lots of food, and we also got lots of flags. All right, and now we're gonna move on to comments. Just in general.
Okay, so first off, we want to say a great job to everyone who competed here, and this competition was extremely difficult. I mean, especially for us because we are, after all, our first time as high schoolers, and so all things considered, everything went well. Well, at least for us. I don't know. So some things we learned. Signatures seem to be very important. If we found out we could just tamper with it, then it's kind of just like leaving your keys in a keyhole. We can just bit flip, and then we can kind of just steal your identity. We did learn a lot about cryptography. I mean, it is our first time, and we learned how a lot of different ciphers worked in the process of our attack phases and also our design phases. And as our good friend Arthur here says, sometimes the real ciphers that we broke were the friends we made along the way. I don't really get that one, but it's fine. Anyways, yeah, embedded devices are a lot of work, and they are especially hard because it's both hardware and software, and you kind of also just have to deal with not having an operating system to do all of your stuff with. And yeah, so there we go.
All right, we're gonna open it to questions now. Thank you very much. Yeah, question time.
I'm just curious, what made you guys choose Ascon over like Cha-Cha Poly? Because we also ended up using Ascon and we like a specific reason.
So one of the actual reasons we were using Ascon was because UIUC used it last year. So, and okay, so and the other thing is it's not a stream cipher, and stream ciphers have a lot of foot guns like bit flipping, and if you don't do the tag correctly, and since it's symmetrical, you could have some kind of like not constant time or other issues with it. So if you have a block cipher, you mangle the entire block when you mangle one of the blocks. So it should be a bit more difficult. And I think some teams had block ciphers that were harder to had designs that were harder to attack because they used block ciphers, and that would cause the entire block to be mangled. Yeah.
First off, I want to say great design, especially from a high school. I'm really, really impressed. Amazing work, guys. So I wanted to ask, how did you come up with your tree derivation, and what was it like implementing it for your first time and everything?
So our key tree kind of came from like a model that was more like for levels of access. And so, for example, like an admin might have the root key and they can access all the sub nodes, and then like lower privileged users have lower keys, right? And then we saw that we could use this to like actually be like time based, and so that's essentially how we came up with it. For implementation, it was interesting because we didn't realize that we actually had to consider like overflow,
Yes,
overflow method.
I actually was writing the arithmetic code to determine like the start and the ends of every child node. And I realized I did like start plus end over 2 or something like that. And that just overflowed. And I didn't notice that until actually one of my teammates told me this number is going to overflow if you get too big. So that was a bit tough, but that was okay.
And I think a big thing is we really got to key tree through a couple brainstorming sessions, right? we all got together a couple times and we just kept working on it. And then we ended up stumbling onto that, which was really, it was really surreal to look at all the other designs and see what they were doing the same thing. That was really fun.
Awesome work again. I'm really impressed. I'm assuming because you all did so good that you must have some experience working with embedded system security. You've done some of this before in your free time. Can you talk to like kind of your first introduction to embedded system security and how you learned what you know?
Right. So actually, this is most of our first time working on this. Before, we had to do a lot of research going into this. We had to do, we read a lot of things, read a lot of papers, we read a lot, watched a lot of videos. In our information security club in the past, we've delved more into like cybersecurity, like more like software, like hack, not like related to hardware. But so this is really our first time doing all this hardware stuff.
I've done like a little bit of stuff with Arduinos before, but not even transferable to this. What I did, it was like rocket coding. I didn't even code as much. I think really kind of the takeaway is that we're so lucky to have a community of people who we were really excited to work on it. And we just all kind of learned together and got through it together. And that was pretty fun.
I'll just say one more thing. Ryan, he was like a coding genie. So he figured a lot of stuff out that we were having a lot of trouble with.
I just want to add one comment. Most of these kids are seniors, so why is this all going on? They are applying for schools. So that's an additional struggle for the kids and the parents as well.
This is more of a client. I'm in from UIC, Mountain View High School. Specifically, Ryan also contributed to our community Rust hardware abstraction layer. One of the only people to do this. So thank you for your contributions as well.
What enabled one thing we've noticed with high schools is it can be hard to structure time to compete because college students are spending up to 3 a.m., 5 a.m., all hours of the night. But for high schools, it tends to be a little bit difficult. How did you structure it to have the time to be able to compete?
So a lot of the time we used was during weekends when we met up in person. That's where we had a lot of our in-person meetings. Also during lunchtime, some days we'd work on, trying to get the code running, trying to break to get more flags. Other times we worked virtually through Discord because we have really packed schedules. So sometimes, in the rare times that they align, or like even if it doesn't align, we talk through Discord or maybe we hop in like a call, maybe we call each other to work on this. I think it also helps that we're, as Fred said, in such a really great community that's very dedicated to working on this. It's a good morale boost and it really helped us get to the end. Yeah.
Maybe the final thing is also food. Every time we met up, we had food.
The food is very good. We got pho, we got Taiwanese food. Great.
Great, thank you so much. Up next is something that as a team that eCTF founder Dan Walters has been waiting for 10 years now. He is hurt for 9 years to watch Ohio State and Michigan State compete and succeed in the eCTF and not have a University of Michigan team as a Michigan alum. So we're excited to see them compete for more than one reason. And without further ado, Michigan.
Hello, my name is Ethan. I'm here with my teammate Andre and then the rest of our team online. Yeah, last year our security team, WOSEC, we were like, oh, like we should do this eCTF. Like one of our officers was like that, and then we like petitioned a ton of professors, got one to say yes, and then that challenge. That's how we got there. So today we're gonna do a brief overview of our design, similar, go over our attack, and then just do some final comments and lessons learned. So similar, actually pretty much identical to the Mountain View High School. We use ASCON AAD. This lets us like do certain computations on like the timestamp without having to decrypt part of it. We had a tree-based derivation scheme that allows us to have time-scoped keys so that basically if a team was able to fully pwn our device, they would only be able to get access for the timestamps that they had a valid subscription to. And we also use ED for authentication from our encoders. So if a team was able to get the channel key, they could like encrypt the data, but then no other decoder would accept it because they check the authenticity to check that it's coming from the encoder. On the software side, we are TRNG for stack randomization. It's kind of like a pseudo ASLR implementation. We set memory as non-executable with the MPU. We also just like enable GCC flags for making things a little harder. All right, so our protocol, we start on the left with our signature that's coming from our encoder. We had the authenticated data in blue, and then the data in white is just the data that's associated with the encryption. Key takeaways are each frame is encrypted with a new key. So every timestamp is a unique key, and it's signed with this asymmetric key. The metadata is sent unauthenticated as the authenticated or unencrypted as the authenticated data. And then the subscription data contains just this minimal key set that only lets you decrypt the specific timestamps where you get a subscription to. All right, and I'll hand it off to Andre to go deeper into that.
Yeah, so I mean, you'll hear about this tree like a million times today, but the main idea with our design was to make sure that everything was fine-grained so that we can control access to everything. And even if like a team got full access to the device and could dump all the memory, like even if our design was full of holes, if our cryptography was sound, then we would have been fine. So, you know, to defend against no subscription or expired subscriptions, we had per channel keys. Every device had a special key that only that device had to access their subscription. So even if you got that key, then you couldn't just look at some other teams, some other devices subscriptions and get the keys. And you know, the most difficult part is how to isolate timestamps. You know, we had a ton of thinking. There's so many possible timestamps. You can't really just send out, you know, billions, and I don't even know the number, like so many keys. So we thought about it, and we came up with this design. I guess the way we came up to it, it was inspired from multi-level page tables from operating systems. So essentially just traversing this key gives you, this tree gives you access to different timestamps. And so we have an example here. If you want to get access from 1 through 7, then you don't need all the keys through 1 through 7. You just need 3 keys that are like golden. But yeah, that was like, you know, zero trust design. That was the idea. So we'll talk a little bit about some attack highlights. So we realized that a lot of the teams didn't have authentication on their frames. So in some way or another, you could tamper with them to get some result or influence the encryption mechanism. So in many cases, it was actually super helpful to know ciphertext plaintext pairs that you could then later use on your attack to influence the results of the decryption. So we set up a Raspberry Pi, and for each design, we had to come with a different way to just collect ciphertext plaintext pairs, and we just let it run all day long. One particularly interesting design was using AES ECV, so that then we could grab any block that we had collected and then use it wherever we wanted. And there's a buffer overflow when decrypting subscriptions, but it would only write to memory data that was decrypted. So we couldn't just choose whatever we wanted and write it to memory. So we just ran the farm, we just ran it for like 5 days. And then we found some piece of data that when decrypted would give a memory address that was actually pointing to the master key of the device. So we used this buffer overflow to put the decrypted data overflow. It was a pointer to an error message in the system. You would overflow that pointer, and then the system would error because you put some garbage in there, and it would just print the master key. Well, I printed like 13 bytes, and then we just brute forced the rest. It was like incredibly lucky. If you do the math, it's like very unlikely you'll hit that number, but we weren't just like shooting for the moon. There's a bunch of things we were trying to hit, and it just so happened that like that was the first one we found. So that was pretty interesting. Oh, yeah, and I have a graph that kind of explains how the process worked in this case. Essentially, it's kind of a ladder. You send some encrypted header that you know the plain text for, and you get the double decryption. So that's like the third step. And then you send the header, and then you get the double decryption again. So that's the fourth step. And then you just take what you already know, and you send it again, and just go for infinity. So this way, you didn't actually have to listen to the satellite to collect stuff. You just got one frame, and then you just extend that to infinity. So that helped it be much more efficient. We also did timing side channels. So again, some teams were using memcompare to verify some authentication tags. The problem is that memcompare does byte by byte comparison. So depending on when you differ, then you'll fail earlier or later. You can use that time to figure out which byte is actually different. There's different ways we measured it. You could do UART to UART, you do LEDs, combination of them. So people on the team just grabbed the attack board and just absolutely destroyed it, soldered wires everywhere. And then we had an STM, which is a small microcontroller that you could use to time precisely when something would happen. And then depending on the design, if there's a lot of noise, you would do statistical analysis to like figure out what was going on. Particularly interesting for the UART was that the microcontroller was faster than the UART clock. So you would land on one clock or the next one. So you had a bimodal distribution. And then you just, do math magic to figure out what was going on. So yeah. Oh, and then some countermeasures, you can figure out information based on how long operations take. So the main idea is that you want to give no information at all. So you want to make all important comparisons constant time so that attackers can't figure out anything from that.
Then we just have a slide on some miscellaneous infrastructure. So in the design phase, team member of ours set up a QEMU emulation in the Max board. So we patched out UART. We didn't really patch out too many of the other hardware devices, but this let us, we had a really big team, 30 people. So we only had I think 5 microcontrollers in the beginning. So this let us have multiple people doing development at the same time. We also tried implementing the American Fuzzy Lob fuzzer. This was really not really successful because there was a buffer overflow in the reference design that basically once you overflowed that in the region of memory, it overflowed into, it just crashed the decoder. So there was only 1 or 2 teams that were able to get an attack with that. But that was kind of fun in setting up infrastructure for that. We had a remote setup with a Raspberry Pi. It was actually an Orange Pi, which is a Raspberry Pi knockoff. But you can see a picture of that here. Basically, similar to CCSF, we soldered on a wire to SW1. We had a power relay, and then we controlled it via GPIO, so we could remotely SSH in. The setup for this was really jank because I just used what available hardware we had. There was an Xbox 360 and the storage closet in the lab we were at. So I plugged that into the Orange Pi, and the drivers only supported Python 2 to build the Python bindings. So instead, it was I got a static host name for from RIT, and then we would VPN into the campus network, SSH into port forward a VNC port, and then VNC into the Orange Pi to run a C++ program that would give us a live view of the Orange Pi so we could see whether or not our farm died or not. Kind of jank, and it would have been a lot nicer to have something just get an actual webcam, but it was fun. And then lastly, for Pesky Neighbor, which was one of these flags where you had to submit, actually on Slack, you would submit a zip file containing a Python script that would cause a decoder to basically violate one of the security requirements we talked about before. This one, it basically became a race towards the end when a lot of teams were submitting designs that had some easier to attack methods. So for example, per channel timestamps or similar, where you could send a timestamp for one channel and then send a timestamp, an older timestamp from another channel, and that was invalid.
but a lot of teams didn't catch us. So we had a generalized script that we made initially, though you put in the IP and the port, and it would grab a frame from 2 channels, package that into a Python script, zip it up, and then give it to you so you can upload it. But then we went through a little bit of trial and error and eventually realized like, okay, we can have the MITRE server actually grab those frames and do all the stuff on the MITRE server. And then we also were like, oh wait, why don't we just make like a generalized script? So we ended up having one zip file that we actually pinged out and downloaded a Google Doc and then grabbed the IP and port from those and then use that to generate the frames. And then we also had I did like a little bit of exploration into the Slack workflow and like automatically submitting a view with like proxying the WebSockets. I don't know, some shenanigans that didn't end up getting us any flags because we did it all super last minute, but that was kind of fun. And then, yeah, final comments, if more time and resources, we ended up using SHA-1, which is kind of funny, but it actually didn't really matter for our design, but we would have implemented Blake 3 for our HKDF. Adding more random delays. We had a double if compiler where it would double up all the ifs statements so that like if someone was able to voltage glitch past one if statement, they'd have to glitch past multiple. But we didn't end up implementing it in our final design because the performance got too slow. Attack phase, voltage glitching would have been great to get working. Automated pesky earlier, better remote setup, more infrastructure. And then also more documentation. There was some like knowledge siloing towards the end, and then not underestimating potential attack vectors. So the timing was kind of like a moonshot initially, but we got it working and we're like, oh, maybe there was more stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I just want to know what the Xbox 360 was for.
Oh yeah, I mean that was just I didn't have another webcam, and it was like they had a bunch of old Xbox 360s in the closet, and I like asked if we could just borrow one, and they were like, yeah, sure. So I just borrowed that instead of a webcam. Or like remote monitoring our farm because sometimes it would like crash, and we would have to like send someone to campus to restart.
So that double if compiler pass, was that something you wrote or is that something that you found off the shelf?
One of the members on our team wrote it. Yeah.
For like LOVM?
GCC.
Wacky.
How did you manage such a large team and work effectively together?
So it was a little tough. Like the reason why we had such a big team is that since it was our first time competing, we wanted to offer up the opportunity to as many students as possible. Like not all the students had experience with embedded systems or security. So it was a lot of work to try to break up interest groups, like people who are interested in like working on cryptography, people who want to work on embedded systems. Some people were like, I don't care, I just want to destroy stuff. So it was essentially like mostly ran by like club members from the security club that we just kind of signed like team lead positions, and we had like almost like mini team meetings where we would like cover some topics and like also work on stuff. Like I think it was a decent amount of work, but essentially like breaking it up into sections helped a lot. And I do think we could have done better in that aspect, but you know, you have so much time to compete and also help others, and also, you know, classes and like stuff. So, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I think I spent like probably about equally as much time on like infrastructure and structure, and like spending so much time like trying to help other like, you know, get these things to make it easier to flash the board, and then they're like, oh, we have like a week left, we should actually like finish our design.
When you were doing the side channel attack for like timing the LEDs or timing the UART, especially timing UART to like figure out what the memcomp was trying to check against, did you run into any difficulties with the like precision of the timing? And I know you mentioned that you had to average a little, but did you have any difficulties with like you still weren't able to get a lot of precision even after averaging a lot?
Yeah,
There was, I think we ended up taking the min of most of the computations, and then also we just took like a lot of them, like repeated them consistently over like many hundreds of runs, and then averaged it out.
Okay, thank you.
I think for like the more noisy signals, even when it was fully automated, it would still take like probably like 30, 40 minutes to do one of them, just because there was so much noise in the signal. They used like the ones that we just used the LED. That's a really clean signal, so that was like super fast. But just UART to UART was really noisy.
Okay, yeah, I think we've also experienced the same thing. So yeah.
Did you explore? Well, first, as someone who's worked on compiler dev, kudos for going for GCC. That is, oof, GCC is a mess to work with. Did you explore any other compiler optimizations or any compiler countermeasures?
So, I mean, some of the pre-configured stuff, like you just type a flag, like a compiler flag in, and like get a stack canary. Like we enabled as many of those as we could. Some of them would just crash the device because like they require an operating system. But besides just like address sanitizing as well, that was pretty interesting. Like you can compile a special version of the program that will just immediately crash if you touch any memory that you shouldn't. So that was useful for testing. But besides the double compiler pass, double if, I don't think we did any more. I don't remember.
Yeah, no, I think it was just the default flags and such.
Up next, I am excited to introduce our speaker, our keynote speaker, Dr. Mark Peters, President and CEO of MITRE. Dr. Peters is a recognized expert in nuclear energy and national security, having spent more than 25 years leading scientific discovery for federally funded research and development centers. Before joining MITRE, he served as the Executive Vice President for Laboratory Management and Operations at Battelle Memorial Institute. Prior leadership roles include Director of the Idaho National Laboratory and President of the Battelle Energy Alliance, LLC, a large multi-purpose laboratory focused on nuclear energy, national and homeland security, and energy and environmental science and technology. He holds a bachelor's degree in geology from Auburn University and a doctorate in geophysical sciences from the University of Chicago. Without further ado, Dr. Peters.
How's it going? Y'all well? You gotta be better than that, wasn't it fun? So you heard, I know, do people know what Aurora is? Have you heard of Aurora? The famous thing where INL made a generator shake and quiver and smoke and all that. Go look it up on YouTube. So it really was my first indoctrination when I got to Idaho into the sorts of things that y'all are exploring today. The whole idea of embedded control systems and the fact that there's such a tremendous vulnerability in everything that we do, right? Cars, medical devices, the grid, water systems, spacecraft, you name it. So the fact that y'all are here and thinking about this problem, I think is really, really, really fantastic. I don't have to tell this group that I think we all went through with the design phase and then those who continued on into the attack phase. It's pretty hard. It's like a senior project, pretty complex, pretty difficult. Yeah. There's college and high schoolers in here, right? Where are the high schoolers? No, they were just up there. That's great. That's great. You're going to college, right? Yeah. Come work at MITRE. Sorry, sponsors, if there's anybody. Again, I think you're working on such an important problem. This problem is only going to get more and more and more complex with time as we get more and more automated. Another short story. When I was in one of my previous roles, I was honored to go testify in front of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence on the topic that y'all are worried about. And one of the senators said to me, so Mark, would it be easier if we just stayed analog in an analog world and didn't go digital? And a part of me was like, yes, sir, I'd probably be a little bit easier to protect everything, but that's not the right answer. So what we really need is we need people who can think about the systems, understand them from the design phase, design in security, like you all tried to do during your design phase, and then also be sophisticated enough to figure out how to attack. So the way I'll put it is the best defenders are the best offenders, right? You've got to be able to do both. And that's what we're really doing as a country and as a set of laboratories, as a set of federally funded research and development centers like MITRE. We're working on both aspects of it because you have to. It's such a really, really interesting, complex problem. It requires engineers. It requires people who understand the threat. It requires all kinds of engineering, folks who understand the control system, and folks who understand numbers and math and all that kind of stuff. So the fact that you're in this field, it's one of the most interesting interdisciplinary fields that I think I've ever encountered, quite frankly. And coming from nuclear energy, that says a lot. But everywhere you go, it's cyber, cyber, protect, protect, protect. So you're in a really cool field. You should be really, really excited about what you're doing. My understanding is that it started out with like 139 schools involved, and then there was a down select. And those of you that presented today were the top of the top. So congratulations to those who got there. But most importantly, thank you for everybody who participated in the program. We're very proud to be a part of it. And know that you've got a very bright future. I hope all of you continue on exploring this interesting field. Because from the perspective of this nation and the world, if we don't protect those systems, you're talking about saving lives. You're talking about protecting critical infrastructure. I'm on the board of a utility, and I can tell you every meeting we talk about cyber and how we're protecting the grid from a potential cyber attack from an adversary. And it's always like we're a half a step ahead. This room understands that better than most, right? That it's really, really difficult. The attack surfaces are broad and hard to understand. So please keep working on these important problems and stick with the field and get your education and then go work for a lab, a university, for a company. Many of whom who are interested in all of you and watching your careers. So keep at it, all right? Because you're doing such important work. I just wanted to congratulate you for how far you've come and where you're going to go. And I look forward to seeing how far you all will go, each of you individually. So all the best. Take care and have a great weekend.
So up next, I'd like to introduce the Purdue University team. This is the 5th year that we've had a Purdue team, and they ended the scoreboard in 2nd place. Purdue is one of the 4 teams to submit on day 1 of the handoff. And if you all remember, day 1 of the handoff coincided with a global Slack outage. So when we woke up and tried to start getting everything going, became a triage of what was a problem on the MITRE side and what was a problem on the Slack side. Turns out it was Slack side problem. But Purdue managed to get through this and submit on day 1. So without further ado, Purdue.
All right. Hello, everyone. We're from Purdue University. There are actually 3 teams that competed in Purdue, but we are Purdue 3. And I'm joined here with my teammates. This is Jack, this is Sebastian, this is Kevin, and this is not Gabriel. This is actually Sam. And I am the Zero Whiff space under Kevin Yu. But actually, I'm here to introduce our team. My name is Lucas, and this is the rest of our Boiler CTF team. We have this nice crowd of 20 or so people working on eCTF this year. And I think we're really excited to participate for the 5th year in a row. And this presentation, we're going to go through the design, our infrastructure, and what we did for our attacks. So I'm going to pass it off to Sebastian for our design.
So we had a very similar design to a lot of the teams, as you'll probably see. But our main idea was that we wanted to assume everything can get leaked by an attacker. So even if they managed to dump secrets off of Flash, they would still only be able to find the frames that they would have already been able to. So this helps with stuff with hardware attacks, because if we assume they can leak stuff, then it doesn't matter quite so much if they're able to, say, glitch stuff. And also it mitigates stuff like remote code execution, because if you could already keep it safe without having the flash, or with the flash rather, then it doesn't really matter. So we used Cha-Cha. A lot of teams use various different things, but we use Cha-Cha because it's mostly side channel resistant and it's relatively fast. So we had one key per channel and one subscription key per decoder, and all of the communication between the decoder and the encoder was encrypted. So we wanted to do something like a lot of the other teams had, where you have a single key for every single timestamp, because then you can't have accidental keys for the wrong timestamp. And so we ended up also converging on the very same tree design. But how we got to it was the idea of a key ratchet, where you had a linear sequence of hashes. And unfortunately, that doesn't really work because there's such a large range of time that's valid. And so if you wanted to do, several 100,000 hashes to get to the right timestamp, that would work, but we didn't have the time for that. So we ended up deciding on a hash tree, but we decided that a hash would take a little bit too long. And so we ended up using Cha-Cha as a PRNG instead. And so this is the same tree design you've seen before, so I'm not going to go over it again. So I'm going to get to the more interesting part, which is the infrastructure. But before that, we had a couple of other things. So pesky neighbor is still a problem, obviously, if you don't do authentication, as a lot of the other teams have mentioned. And so we used EDDSA for that. And then we also used Rust, like a lot of the other teams, but we did not use Sigpony's HAL. We had our own from last year, so that saved us a lot of time because we didn't have to rewrite that. And obviously Rust has a lot of built-in protections against memory corruption and other similar bugs. And we also use the memory protection unit to forbid read, write, and execute in the same memory, hopefully to make code execution harder. And originally we had ASLR on every single section, so data, stack, and flash. But it turned out that putting ASLR in the flash ended up causing issues. So we disabled that, but the other ones were still there. All right.
I'm going to briefly talk about our infra for a bit. So at a high level, we had two main parts to our infra. We had ScrapeBot, which I'll just refer to as Tom Scott, kind of like a Swiss Army knife, Discord, Slack, everything kind of bot. And then Build Server, which is our image building and distribution system. So during the dev phase, it's pretty simple. We had GitHub Action that every time someone would push to our design repo, we would just send the commit hash to the build server. The build server would build it in a centralized place, and then send off the image to one of our attack pies. These pies were hooked up to the boards, and they would just test for functional requirements, run some automated attacks, and then if there was a failure anywhere in the process, we just report it in our Discord server. So we have some alerting for that. What's more interesting is during the attack phase. So every time there was a push in the attack targets channel, Tom would be listening, and whenever we received a push, we'd create a new channel in Discord so we could discuss. We would push the design to the targets repository. We had a repository of designs, so people could just pull from that to check out people's designs. We'd run some automated attacks on the new package, so we'd send off the image to the build server again. Build server would distribute it to one of our pies. And we would try to run some deep basic attacks we thought maybe a few teams would be vulnerable to. And then we'd queue the pesky neighbor. So by our estimation, we had approximately 18 automated flag submissions. And we didn't really get pesky neighbor fully working at the start, but ultimately in the end, I think we got approximately 5 first floods through this automated attack system. And I'll just talk about some problems with infra. The main problem was that the format of the attack target messages kept changing. So at the start, we assumed it would all be in the format up there, right? Host, IP, and then the ports. Turns out that wasn't the case. Sometimes there would be missing ports in the message. The labels changed. Eventually, when they switched to the eCTF bot, they would send the packet in a different message. right? And so that posed its own problems as well. Originally, our Tom Scott wasn't really resistant to this, so he would crash each time, and it was a bit of a headache. It became such a problem that it became like a bit of an in joke in our team. We called it Sam Myers Infra, but it's okay. It was just like a challenge to overcome, you know. Eventually, now I think Tom's a little more resistant to this kind of stuff. But some highlights: UCSC Pesky Neighbor, the first team that I believe dropped at 5 a.m. Some teams I think were awake to do this. We were all asleep, but it's okay because Tom Scott got the first flood anyways. And then there was that time when we mysteriously somehow got a NEU2 first flood, despite no one working on that. But it turns out it was just our automated attacks, and then our logging was broken, so we didn't see that. But yeah. And then I think I'll pass on to Jack for tech. One more slide. Yeah, just a thing. This is from our presentation from last year, which references our presentation from 2 years ago where we said we'd make infra. Last year we still didn't make infra, but we finally did it, and I think it paid off.
So guys, moving on to the attacks. We had a lot of the standard attacks which are like buffer overflow, leaking stuff off the stack. We had the default pesky neighbor. There were some like leaked secrets, as well as like some standard crypto attacks like flipping bits with counter mode and such. But then I'll get to some of the more interesting attacks. So our first one, we had one team where they use ECB, but the overwrite is decrypted first. I think Mish talked about this one, but basically we used a similar attack to them where when you send it as the ciphertext of a channel 0 frame, you can get the double decrypt, and you can see that diagram. It allows us to build a huge chain of plain text ciphertext pairs. And using that, after about 5 hours of generating those, we basically looked through all the ciphertext, saw return addresses that were inside the flash memory. Eventually, we found one that returns inside of like MXC GPIO init. And what that does, it doesn't crash, then it moves the stack up, then it tries to return. And so the stack is then in like the UART buffer, so we can control the return address and get code execution that way. And then we just leak the keys. So another one, which is a little more complicated. I don't know if I'll have like time to go through the whole thing, but basically there's one team that had a ASCBC mode, but they did not use a MAC or any signature. And we see the subscription has 3 blocks. And so what we wanted to do is try and manipulate the timestamps. And basically the way we did that was we can change the timestamp block, but that will affect the next block, which has to be a particular value. So we need to have like an oracle that decrypts the last block. And what we did, I guess I probably have to skip over some of this. Like basically the decode functionality, it decrypts twice with CBC, so you can like construct. I don't know. The diagram's not going to come up, but you can construct 2 different oracles, and then you can basically just get it so you can decrypt the XOR of like known plain texts if you have the known pair. Yeah, so it's shown here, and yeah, so we get that. And then what we can do is you can think of them as like vectors spanning 128 vector space and over GF2 field. And then you could just use REF to solve the equation and determine which plain text and ciphertext to use. So then you can decrypt the block. Oh, yeah. And I guess we had one more theoretical attack, which I guess it won't show up, but yeah. Basically that one had a D table pointer, and we like did stuff based on the memory regions with like a binary search, but it seemed like it'd be too, we couldn't power cycle the boards very well, so we couldn't do that. So yeah, I guess we're out of time. So.
Right. Questions?
Why Tom Scott?
That's actually an interesting question. It started last year when we first made the bot. It only had the dev server implementation because the attack phase, we never got the build server working. Something got nicked out. But yeah. So I think last year we were for CTF we posted separately. We were working on some challenges, and one idea we had was Tom Scott.
Yeah, Tom Scott would teach you about something. He would teach you about some like cool tech. And then that got scrapped. So we just decided to use Tom Scott instead.
Yeah. It was like a reverse, it would have been a reverse engineering challenge where you open the code and you see like ASCII art of Tom Scott there and it's like talking about something. It's a long story. Anyways, that's why it's called Tom Scott.
Hey guys, great job. Why split the team this year for Purdue instead of competing as just one school?
We didn't really know that there was going to be other teams at the time. we are participating from our CTF club, but one team was working. It's just one person working independently, we think.
Yeah.
And then another team was a group of a couple of people who did a lot of hardware stuff, I think.
It was like an ECE senior project. It was like Purdue 2, I think.
So we weren't aware that there was other teams until we registered, and it's like, oh, you're Purdue 3. We're like, what?
So when did you start developing Tom?
Developing what?
Tom Scott.
Well, I think as I mentioned previously, Tom like dates back to last year, but a lot of the new stuff we added this year, like the attack infrastructure, I think we started developing that like as soon as we entered attack phase, like as soon as like we saw what the attack would look like.
I saw in your Discord screenshot of Tom that you use multiple build servers instead of like one central build server. What made you settle on that design?
It's not multiple build servers per se. It's more like we had a central server building images, and then once we had the build images, we had like multiple pies, like just like in people's dorms around the school, hooked up to things. Because like I think attacking would take a while. So like the thought process was like if we have multiple jobs, we wanted to like run them in parallel. Yeah, so we could send them to like different pies and like have one be attacking one design, one be attacking the other.
In like design and attack phase, how did you split your time up between working on actually building the thing and then spending all this time on the really great infrastructure? Because I know we kind of had a hard time with that, but
we've split up a lot. So we had a couple of people working on design and a couple of people working on infra and a couple of people developing attacks before attacks started. Not that we didn't get very far with that, but it was mostly split up. So we had a couple of people on infra specifically.
Thank you. So up next is University of California, Los Angeles. Like the City College of San Francisco, UCLA is a second-year team, and they've had another stratospheric rise over their 2-year arc. UCLA was one of the 9 teams of the 50 in the attack phase to have defended all of their flags. So without further ado, UCLA.
All right, hello everyone. We're Team IFAVER from UCLA. We're a collaboration of 2 clubs actually, ACM Cyber, it's the cybersecurity club, and IEEE, they do hardware. And our team is a lot bigger. Everyone listed is just the people here, but we have a lot of other teammates who did really good work. Yeah, we, as mentioned before, we got a lot further than we thought we would, but without further ado, yeah, let's get into it. So.
Yeah, so for our secure design, we mainly focused on cryptography to provide our security. So we did a lot of things. For example, we signed every single communication we made, whether it's a subscription package or a actual TV frame. We use key derivation to figure out the keys for each decoder, because each decoder needs to have a different key to prevent like pirating subscriptions. So we use the PBKDF2 algorithm. To encrypt everything, we use authenticated encryption with associated data, so SHA-SHA-20 plus Poly 1305. And we did a similar like tree-based key derivation for each timestamp that the other teams have talked about. So I'm just going to go over it very quickly. Again, we start with a channel specific key that's for the entire timestamp range of 2 to 64. And the idea here is that we want to grant each timestamp a different key, but that's a lot of keys. So instead, what we do is we take the root key and kind of divide it into halves a bunch of times. The specific way we did this is we hash it with SHA-256 and then split it in half to create the two like smaller timestamp keys, and then keep doing that all the way down to like a timestamp range of 1. So again, our idea was originally we need a different key for every timestamp, but this is going to be too infeasible. So we have this guy named Tom on our team, another Tom. He came up with this, and we love Tom very much for coming up with this. But yeah, it's very similar to the other teams. The only difference is that we to create the random permutation, we use SHA-256, and then we just split it in half.
So theoretical crypto is great and all, but we also had to actually implement this code into our board. And it turns out we had some pretty interesting difficulties in doing that. One thing we did, first of all, was that we decided since we looked at the reference design on day 1 that it came out, and we were like, wait a minute, this has like a huge buffer overflow vulnerability. So one of the decisions we made very, very early on was that we were going to basically take like the existing meter protocol and kind of just rewrite it such that like every single packet would be constant sized. And so there'd be like we would literally just like look at the length of the packet and then check to make sure that that matched the size that we expected. And I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that a couple of other teams actually did the same sort of check in their code. So I guess we weren't that original. But one kind of problem with this is that, as other teams have kind of stated with this sort of like key registering algorithm, is that you need like 128 keys they're all like 64-bit keys in order to like fully represent like a timestamp range. And that's a lot of data to both send over the UART and also to write to flash to the board. And it actually turns out that when we first like actually submitted our design was way too slow. So what we ended up doing is that we actually overclocked the board. It turns out there's just actually a method you can call in the SDK to just use a much faster processor. For some reason, the board starts in a slow processor state by default. The other thing we did is that we actually reduced our prefix key size from 32 bytes to 16 bytes, which also massively helped improve performance. Next button. Now, things we would have differently. If you looked at our team's code, you may have noticed that we didn't have any timing delays, and we didn't have any like double if checks or any like really fancy like protections against like voltage glitching or timing channel attacks. And honestly, I'm pleasantly surprised that we are one of the 9 teams who have not been pwned yet, given that we literally did not like implement like any of the really cool functionality we've seen other teams do today. So if we were to do this again, and we will probably do this again next year, we'd probably add more random delays. We'd probably think a bit more about hardware attacks, especially looking at a certain team's code to disable every single peripheral on the board, and also fault injection. Another thing that a couple of members of our team actually did some fuzzing of our own design. We took a QEMU fork that was used to emulate the board from another team, and we were actually able to get that to work on with this year's code. And we actually were able to obtain all the reference design flags using only the emulated version of the board. So in the future, we'll probably look to like continue using emulation as a way to like run tests on our board without having to like actually solder wires onto the board and do whole remote infrastructure. So yeah.
So now we can talk about the attack phase highlights. So in our attack phase, we employed many different attacks, software and hardware, but I guess one of our key highlights was a certain hardware attack that we did. So for a few teams, when the teams were checking the HMAC of packets to verify that the HMAC was correct, they're using the memcmp function. And the thing about the memcmp function is that it's not constant time because it has to iterate through all of the bytes in order to verify like the equality. So the thing about this is that a lot of teams had the LED blink before the check as like just a way to like act the packet, and also after the check to like say that, hey, this memcmp failed. So the thing about this is that this opens up a side channel opportunity in which we can time how many bytes were correct in our provided HMAC by just like timing how long the memcmp took to do. And we use this by hooking up a chip whisper to the to like the LED and just probing it. And yeah, we're able to use this to forge the expected HMAC byte by byte and pwn some teams. And if you can see in the diagram over there, that is our setup. It's very suspicious. We have a resistor carefully holding a probe to the LED wire. So yeah, that was our side channel. And I guess the suggested fix to this side channel is to just try to provide as little information as possible. Just like try to use constant time operations instead of memcmp, and also just like add randomized delays everywhere, because that'll just mess up all of the LED traces. Yeah.
I'd like to add that there's also a lot of teams that didn't do this with the LED. They just kind of, sent a message back and forth on UART if the memcomp fails. And we noticed that this had like a lot more noise with the timing. So we weren't able to figure out how exactly to get that noise down to an acceptable level to get these flags in a reasonable amount of time. But maybe there's some more tricks we can try there for future times. Some of the other attacks we did was a lot of teams had exposed secrets in their files, like exposed keys. So you can just quickly pwn them using that. A lot of teams use insecure cryptography modes like AES ECB, which allows, I think one team has already talked about this, but kind of like swapping blocks or swapping headers of packets so that the decoder thinks that they're from a different channel or from their own decoder ID. We also had a bunch of scripts set up for pesky neighbor, especially for when timestamps were checked per channel instead of globally, or if packets weren't signed, which means that you can flip one bit in them to cause them to decrypt incorrectly. And we had these scripts set up. We didn't fully automate our process, but as you can see, we have this one picture where we submitted our flag at pretty much the same time as another team, and we lost the race. Unfortunate. On top of that, we had a bunch of other crypto attacks as well, especially with teams that are using things like AES ECB or AES CBC. So kind of bit flipping bits in the IV. Also, we had one team that we could use a padding oracle attack. So basically looking at if there's an error with the padding once a ciphertext is decrypted, and using that to kind of build the plain text back. On top of that, we also had a few vulnerabilities with buffer overflows and buffer overreads that we could exploit to leak important information that was used to compromise the devices.
Okay, just to go through some final thoughts really quick. First, we did not abuse the infra to just run boards, we swear. We were very surprised, or maybe not that surprised, but it seems like a lot of teams had the same secure crypto system. So it'd be interesting to see what happens next year, whether there's something like that again. Hardware attacks, this is something like we basically had no experience with. So trying that out for the first time was really cool. And maybe it might be a good idea to learn Rust. If not to write our own thing, at least to be able to read other people's code. So yeah, thanks for listening. Any question?
Really great job. I'm impressed. The comment about nobody attacking you with faults or side channel, despite not having any countermeasures there, do you think that maybe your overclocking may have inadvertently helped in that regard?
Yeah, I think the reason why none of these attacks were successful, at least what I believe to have happened, is that because our cryptography relied on the assumption that even if the attacker has full access to the device, the decoder doesn't actually have the correct information. It needs to decrypt anything outside of the packets it's subscribed to. So even in the event of a full compromise, cryptographically, you just don't have the information to decrypt anything you're not supposed to have. I still am not entirely convinced that this protects us against every single attack, but it seems like that's why, just purely cryptography, that we've been safe.
Also, to add on a little bit to that, I do think our design was actually vulnerable in some places to like a really well-timed like fault injection, especially in like places that check like bounds of like writing before they write buffers. And I am again surprised that team not any teams seem to be able to exploit that. But I do feel like it's because like we do things like we like run on a while loop and like we only like we write one byte if the length is like less than the thing. And so you'd have to like have a really consistent fault injection to like actually get more than one byte of a buffer overrun. So perhaps that also like slowed down a lot of teams and made us not look like a really good target to pwn compared to some of the other teams.
I'm curious, you said you're like a combination of two teams, you're like a relatively large team. Was there any strategies that you guys used to like ensure that like everyone like had the same knowledge and like managing a large team?
Right. So yeah, that was kind of a whole nother challenge in and of itself because we had a lot of beginners, a lot of people with like really not much experience. And so we kind of had two balancing tasks of one, we wanted to do well in the competition, right? But also two, we didn't want to just like say, oh, you can just like go screw around. The real people will work on stuff, right? That's, as clubs, we're committed to, teaching other people. And so we didn't want to do that. And so what ended up happening was that we kind of like split up and so that the more experienced people kind of led different subgroups. So we had like early on, we had one group for like figuring out the cryptography, one group that started working on, like dismantling the insecure design because it was really bad and, just rewriting things securely. And then one more to start thinking about attacks, working on the Chemu fork. And so, yeah, it's just like kind of apportioning people, making sure that everyone had something to work on, even if it was something as simple as, just like writing meeting notes so that they could look over it later on. And, if there's something that other people didn't understand, they could ask one of the more experienced people about it. But yeah, that was quite a challenge, but I'm glad it worked out for us. So.
I guess just add on a little bit to that. Like, I think one thing we did is we had like some of the more experienced people or like people from like last year, like kind of like almost like design architect kind of some of the design and like design phase. Additionally, like for like our pwn group, like we often like even after we successfully pwn something, we often had like some of the newcomers like redo that pwn attack on same on our emulated version of the board just so that they can understand it and so that they could like read like when we actually got to the real attack phase, they could like we could spread out really wide.
All right. Up next is University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. This is UIUC's fourth year in the eCTF. Last year, UIUC and Purdue were locked in a dead heat. I mean, they swapped places over a dozen times, and they ended up with scores within a couple of percentage points of each other. And this year, they continued that tradition, submitting within less than 2 hours apart from each other and swapping positions a half a dozen times. So it was nice to see the Illinois-Indiana rivalry continue and then hopefully to see it persist in the future. So that's UIC.
All right. Hello. So we are Sig Pony from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, or UIUC. We are advised by Professor Kirill Levchenko, and we had 30 members, 6 of whom are here to present. So as many teams have mentioned previously, obviously we have a large team and it comes with its own challenges. A little bit to just summarize how we manage this is we kind of split everyone a bit equally based on their interests into 4 like sub-teams. We had design for like the actual design of the cryptography and decoder and stuff. We had build for managing the build system. We had attack and we had automation. So I'll start with talking about our design really quick. We used Rust with our custom HAL for memory safety. We also tried to create our encoder in Rust as well, so we could share many of the primitives and cryptography things. We were able to do that successfully with Pi03. We used a masked ASCON 128 AAD cipher. We used decoder-specific and channel-specific secrets for encryption, but we were not able to come up with the tree construction in time. So that was kind of the weak point of our design, which is we just weren't able to come up with tree construction. And so our design wasn't as cryptographically secure as other teams. One of our design highlights is our Rust HAL. So this is something that we worked on last year as part of eCTF, and then we open source this year, primarily to encourage more teams to use Rust because it has some notable advantages like memory safety. The result was actually like pretty impressive. We had 9 more teams than last year, which was only 2 teams last year. So we had 9 extra teams using our HAL competing using Rust, which was pretty amazing to see. Fun crab logos down there. Now I'll hand it over to talk about automated attacks.
So we had a fully automated infrastructure similar to what Purdue was describing. We were a little bit more efficient with the resources we had. So in this case, we have a Raspberry Pi. We fully utilize all the GPIO pins almost to basically have 5 boards, 5 max boards attached to a Raspberry Pi at a time. Each has power control switching using a P-channel MOSFET. We have a bootloader pin, which is actually undocumented. It's actually a remnant from last year's competition where they had a specific GPIO pin that you could pull down in order to enter the bootloader mode. So we didn't have to solder on to the switch 1 button. We also had connections to the UART lines. So basically our boards were completely powered without USB. And that allowed us to fully instrument the boards and get super fast reset times. And to the right side here, like the actual physical part is sort of like the bottom part where we have our physical setup. We actually had 2 setups. We had one dedicated to our attack board rigs. So those are the 3 secure boards that Miter provided. And then we have 5 additional boards for dev, which allowed us to flash our own built designs. And we basically built a queuing service using Golang that instruments Slack. So very similar to Purdue's Tom service. Although we didn't really give it as much of a personality. We named it Red Spy in the base, which is a TFT joke for those who don't know. But we were able to implement basically the moment an organizer published a Slack attack package, it would download, build the designs, and run some automated attacks. And we also did automated pesky neighbor. I'll quickly describe our strategy for that. So the idea was that we would collect 1 frame from channel 1 and then 3 more frames from channel 0. Basically, we collect these specific frames because it allows us to modify them and play them in such a way that it tests a comprehensive set of attacks. We decided to use channel 0 because a lot of teams had coded exceptions for channel 0 because this was the emergency broadcast channel. So we thought that would get us more coverage. But the difficulty with channel 0 is that the encoder sends out the frames a lot slower. This is more of a design made by the organizers. And so we had a fully automated pesky setup, as I mentioned. So the moment a attack package would get sent, it would automatically it would create an attack package, which would be uploaded to Slack. We actually had to reverse engineer Slack's API to build a user bot, which could do everything automatically because apps cannot run commands by other apps for obvious reasons. So that involved like webhooks and stuff, and that was kind of annoying to figure out. And then we also automated CTFD flag submissions. So this is pretty good. This is sort of an overview of like the full process of the pesky neighbor. And I'm gonna throw some timestamps on here. The rest of the boxes that don't have timestamps, those are like negligible, so it's almost 0. And basically, you can see we have like a 2-minute solve time on average. We spent 25 seconds to collect the required frames to build our attacks. And again, I mentioned this is because collecting channel 0 frames are pretty slow. And when you actually execute the command, it always takes a consistent 1 minute 30 seconds. This is like an organizer like hard limit. And so we actually figured out there was a very cool speed that we could do where we could parallelize frame collection with the command submission. So basically, when the attack package gets released, we would immediately start collecting the frames, and we would actually host them on a web server later on to be collected by our script. And that way we could send our script immediately to the Slack channel. And so as soon as pesky neighbor runs, it will collect those pre-collected frames from our virtual private server. And this actually saves us the 25 seconds. And this actually allows us to achieve the fastest pesky submission time of 1 minute, 27 seconds, which we aren't sure how that's even possible. But again, this is probably the fastest you can make it go. And I will also say that we got 7 first bloods with this being produced 5. So there's an optimization there. That's what it looks like. And now we'll go to hardware text.
So I'm Nikhil. I'm going to talk about some intro to some of the hardware attacks that we did. So the main hardware attack we did is called voltage glitching. So just for a quick intro of how this works, the basis of this attack is pulling the microcontroller power to ground for a short period of time to try to corrupt what the program is doing. So either you can corrupt some data, like a register value, or you can corrupt the control, which usually results in skipping an instruction. So we have an example here. This is from some example subscription update logic. It turns on an LED, decrypts the subscription update, checks an authentication tag, and processes that. So normally, if you try to tamper with the subscription, the authentication check fails and you get an error message. However, if you skip the instruction, if you skip the branch instruction, the execution just falls through to processing the subscription update. And that essentially lets you process a tampered subscription. It sounds great. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. One issue is that the duration of the glitch needs to be very precise. If it's too short, nothing happens. If it's too long, the board just resets or hard faults, just reboots. The way we solved this was by doing some experimentation, just empirical testing along with some brute force. The timing of the glitch also needs to be very precise. You can imagine if you want to skip a single instruction, the glitch has to happen at a very precise time. So we trigger based on LED, which is a very precise trigger source. And to find the right timing offset, again, there's some experimentation, some instrumentation of the targets on debug boards and stuff like that. The board is also actively working against you when you're trying to glitch. So when you're glitching, you're destabilizing the power supply. To keep it stable, the board has a bunch of capacitors, which we desolder. And even if everything you do right, still doesn't work every time, so we brute force and automate many times.
Right, yeah, so I'm going to quickly talk about some of the logistics of glitching. So you can reference this later. This is all the things that we bought over the few years that we've been working on this. So the first thing you have to do is you have to remove those capacitors that you can see here. I've labeled them in red. You just push them off with your chisel tip. Then what we did is we also added a header onto here so that we can actually, it was mainly for automation, but also then help with glitching so we can interact with the UART directly from the one that you'd use over USB. So kind of, this is how we got started. So you should validate glitches against very simple test programs. So maybe like a big loop, see if you can, change the loop counter, break out of it, something like that. Then build your way up to programs that look closer and closer to what you're actually trying to glitch and learn what kind of behavior you can induce. So if you write a hard fault handler, you can see exactly what kind of things you get. Maybe you get kind of bus faults, you can see what's going on there. And be very systematic. Record your results, only do one change at a time. Also be very patient. Glitching will not work much. Like you'll do 1,000 attempts and you might get it to work. So don't think that it stopped working magically, like give it time, be systematic. So once you have a glitch that works on a very similar test firmware, you need to try it for real. So you'll add a GPIO trigger near the code that you're actually trying to target. Now the compiler might reorder things, so check the assembly, make sure it's the same. And you can use your oscilloscope to measure when that trigger is that you just added compared to what trigger you can actually use on the production board. And then you'll use the chip whisperer to send a glitch at that offset. And you can, again, because the glitch is going to be visible on the power rail, you can observe that. So yeah, this is an image of our setup. And yeah, just closing thoughts, voltage glitching is hard. And we aren't experts, so please come talk to us about and share your results. And there are more powerful attacks. Yeah, this is kind of the chaos that happens when you do this. And okay, the slides aren't loading, but yeah, any questions, please?
So we also had a Chip Whisper Husky, and we did not really enjoy the documentation. I'm sure you guys have also enjoyed wading through the Chip Whisper docs, which aren't awesome. I guess what would you say is kind of your, and I'm definitely going to hunt you guys down after and make you tell me everything. But what was your guys's process for, I guess, working with the Chip Whisper to set up your like basic, I mean, you guys went through kind of methodology, but like, are you, especially, I don't know if you guys did any like timing analysis, but like deciding on shunt resistor sizes and different things like that. What was kind of your methodology in actually connecting it and doing it on a target?
Right. So we didn't actually do any of the timing side channel stuff that our teams mentioned, but specifically about getting familiar with the Chip Whisper, we didn't actually mention these in the slides, but we had a attack sub team that we mentioned earlier, and their whole goal was just sort of get a glitch working on the board. So that doesn't mean get a glitch working on a secure board, just get a glitch working on the board. And so that means that we can actually start working on the debug boards ahead of time. We had students also work on the Chip Whisper Jupyter notebooks. So I don't know if you've seen, but there are practice notebooks where they run through attacks against the target boards that come with the Chip Whisper. So those are very useful, and you should not skip them. You should do them first before you attempt them on like an actual target. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We also had some attempts at voltage glitching, and we spent a bunch of time looking at schematics and trying to figure out like what to desolder, where to connect, how to not kill a board. Like, what are you guys looking for when you're looking at schematics, when you're trying to see, well, I want to remove these capacitors, I want to connect this wire here. Like, what are the things you're looking for?
Sure. So specifically the power rail that we're looking for is vCore A. That is there's actually an internal regulator on the Max chip that generates that voltage along with an external one that boosts the current throughput. But basically anything that's connected to vCore A is kind of what you can use to actually target that, right? To inject your glitch. And we want to remove any capacitors that were associated with that. So those are all the ones that we circled there. There's like some capacitors that have to do with the buck converter, and then also ones that are just for the Max chip itself that are on the schematic. So you can see those. But yeah, basically vCore A is the line that you're looking for.
Does your design have any protection for voltage glitch, or can you attack your own design with the method you just talked about?
So we did have some mitigations against voltage glitching. So we had random delays. We did multiple comparison checks. What we didn't do was we didn't audit the resulting assembly. So this is kind of a grave mistake on our end. So a team was actually able to glitch some of our flags. And again, because we didn't implement the tree construction, our cryptography was weak. This sort of regret on our end, because if we had our defense points, we would be second, but it is what it is.
Thank you.
You mentioned you soldered a header to the board to read UART. Did you find that reduced noise at all over reading over USB?
So we didn't do any comparative analysis. We didn't do any like analysis of whether that was different or not. I was just mainly concerned about like, because there's a DAP link chip that sits between that acts as a USB adapter for the board, and that basically all your UART messages goes through that chip. So we weren't sure if there was some caching or maybe some delay that could be happening. So that's why we opted for soldering the headers directly on. You could have gone for flying wires as well. That's what we did sort of last year as well. But yeah.
Thank you. All right, last but certainly not least is Carnegie Mellon University. I could stand up here and say these number of superlatives about them, but I'm just gonna let them go up and talk themselves.
All right. Good
time is it? It's evening now. All right. Good evening, everyone. I am Carson Swoveland.
And I'm Rohil Chaudhary.
And on behalf of Carnegie Mellon University and the PPP, we are going to take you through our 2025 eCTF competition experience. So we're first going to talk about, our design phase and our design methodology. Then Rohil is going to take you through some of our attacks, and then we're going to wrap up with some, lessons learned. So let's start with our design. So we used a number of different cryptographic and software defenses in order to make our design secure. I'd like to focus on the cryptography for a bit because as previously mentioned, cryptography in the context of a hardware competition is perhaps your most important tool because in the presence of things such as hypothetically fault injection or timing attacks or any other number of hardware vulnerabilities, you can't necessarily trust your system to operate correctly. And so if your cryptography is set up, nicely, then you can put the load onto that and your decoder code no longer necessarily needs to be as well secure because your crypto is. So our design methodology always revolves around, I think another team already mentioned this, you always start by assuming the attacker has full control of the device. They can read everything, they can do arbitrary code execution, whatever. And it turns out even in this context, you can still defend a lot of flags. Whatever you can't do, then that becomes load bearing on your decoder. You need to make sure you do software checks to prevent that. So, you do bounds checks, you do hardening, that kind of thing. Then you go one step lower. Maybe the attacker can only read things, but they can't execute code. And you repeat this process until you've defended all the flags. So perhaps unsurprisingly, it's another tree. So I'm not going to spend too long on this because I think we've seen it discovered independently by a whole bunch of teams by now. It's a binary key derivation tree. We just have some set of root keys that we distribute, and we do a key derivation function of some salt and the left or right key. So even so, we wanted to make sure that our despite our cryptography ostensibly being mathematically infeasible to reverse, we wanted to make sure that nothing slipped through the cracks because protocol design is hard. So we added hardening measures like for fault injection randomized delays. We implemented additional lockouts to prevent brute forcing. We used the MPU to deny read, write, execute pages so that you couldn't, write to executable memory. And we used function layout randomization to prevent to prevent ROPs. So the other thing that we did is that we made sure that we thoroughly tested and reviewed our output. And when I say review, I mean, we were looking at it at the assembly level to make sure that what we wrote actually ended up in there. And we did catch a few very nasty bugs this way. In particular, we wanted to look at things that were very sensitive to the assembly, like timing and like fault injection, things that are very likely to get optimized out. And for things that we couldn't audit by hand, which basically just means our crypto libraries, because that's a whole pile of math that we don't want to touch, we basically just sent an email to the author and said, hey, if we turn on compiler optimizations, is this still going to work? The answer is yes, because it's a good crypto library, but it's always good to check. We also experimented with some static analysis tools, but we didn't really get anything out of that. So let's talk about the attacks.
All right, let's get started with this. So as has been speculated before, one of the key attack vectors that was behind our success was hardware glitching and voltage fault injection. So let me give you a brief overview or sort of a boot camp on voltage fault injection. So electronics need power to operate. And if you don't give them power, they don't operate, right? So now imagine if you had a device which was able to pull your input voltage down or essentially short it to ground for a very small amount of time. What would that lead to? That would essentially lead to your CPU or your chip to stop working for that very small amount of time. What does it do? It can lead to various amount of things, but most importantly, it leads to some very interesting instructions getting skipped, right? Well, it may sound simple, but as simple as this description is, it took us a long amount of time to actually make this working. So, all right. So in order to perform a successful glitch, there are two main things to think about. One being the trigger point. So essentially, one instruction takes around 16 nanoseconds of time at least to execute, and at this level of precision, you definitely need a distinct and consistent event that you can use to time the victim instruction to glitch, right? So this is something we like to call the trigger point. Some of the most common trigger points were changing LED status that have been talked before, right? The second thing is choosing a candidate to glitch, or which can act as a single point of failure. These can include some branch instructions to signature checks, which can help you skip some HMAC verifications or other amount of verifications, or they can also be checks to skip the timestamps of frames, right? But we found an instruction that was much more general and had an immense amount of power as compared to these two instructions, which was present in the write bytes function itself. The write bytes function is a very simple function that dumps bytes to UART. And the source code is basically what you are looking on the top left side of it. This is a perfectly fine C code, which has no vulnerability in it. But after compiler optimizations, this line of code gets optimized into a while statement. And if you look closely to it, if a person was able to make the loop counter greater than the length, then this loop would continue to run forever. So if we fault inject this place where I is initialized to 0, then this I will become something, a very large number, which makes this loop run longer or essentially infinitely long, and helps a person dump additional data. Now, what was it printing? Well, if we look at one of the most common uses of this write byte function, it was to print different errors. And these particular errors used to be hard-coded strings, which are present right before some of the important secrets in functions. And we always used to have some nicely placed LEDs to act as trigger points here, which led us to essentially dump all of RO data, and all of device secrets were easily dumped out. As this turns out, this was a rather effective technique with nearly half of the flags being obtained using something that's called as flashcat. Now you may be thinking why we call this flashcat. Well, we really wanted to have shellcode execution possible, and this was the closest to the cat command, in which you can cat out a file and read all the secrets out. Now, I will hand over to Carson to continue the wrap up.
All right, so I'm gonna go through this a little quickly because you don't want to hear me yet for too long. All right, so there's a couple questions about like why do we still use C? The answer is basic area threat modeling. It's a hardware competition, so hardware vectors are explicitly not in scope for Rust, and we don't know it. And also, it's difficult to audit by hand because it does rocket emoji, fire emoji, blazing fast things, right? So we stuck with C. Our awesome project manager did a very good job of keeping our team in line and keeping our scope intact, and so did a wonderful job making sure that every person knew what they were responsible for, and so that allowed us to submit on schedule. I think one of the most important takeaways are that LEDs and print statements and all your nice debugging tools can be abused. And I want to shout out teams that included a flag to turn them off, during the attack phase. So that's nice. Of course, assume the worst case in your threat model in this competition. You should audit your assembly to prevent mishaps. You should, make sure your responsibilities are clear. And also fault injection, turns out it's really hard. And it takes a lot of time. So here's a couple pictures of our team. Left one is, all our team members, and the right one is our fault injection team after accomplishing the 300 man-hour flag. You basically just lived in there. So, it was time intensive. But yeah, we'd like to thank all of our sponsors for supporting us. And hello. All right. Well, and we'd like to thank you for listening. The next slide is questions anyway. So.
Okay.
Hey, so impressive, amazing. I really loved in specific that graph where you showed just how much of that was FlashCat. I'm really curious, especially as somebody who's newer to cybersecurity than all of you. These are incredibly complicated systems. How did you find FlashCat? How did you discover this? Because that's a pretty intensive hack.
So the reason how I discovered FlashCat, because we had a bunch of ideas kicking around in our heads for a while, about fault injection things, is basically I like buffer overflows. I like buffer overreads, all those things are great. And so anytime there's any function anywhere that gives me useful data and puts it somewhere I can see, that is immediately a target for something. And fault injection, it's the ability to skip anything. So if I have a loop that just, it prints data until a fixed bound, then why not just print data until whenever? And so just putting the idea of I want a buffer overread and I have the ability to just skip things, you put those two together and there's really only one function that's a viable candidate. So then, you go into Ghidra, you audit the assembly and you see, oh, look at that. The compiler has turned this into a nice, very convenient check here. And, then it all falls. Then it's basically just which instruction do I pick to do it? And we found that the I = 0 thing was the most consistent and the easiest.
Thank you.
Thanks. So for teams that did use random delays and didn't use the LED, how did you manage to work around that?
So it depends. But one of the other common techniques was we looked at UART edges. And yeah, so it was basically most commonly UART edges. Now those are, as people have observed during the timing attacks, they are prone to a lot of jitter. So our attempts go up by a factor of 10, 100. Yeah, the number of attempts required for that goes up 100-fold, and it gets very painful. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm curious, you mentioned there's a lot of time investment on the voltage glitching and there's a lot of investment in making that process better. On the hardware side, what were some techniques they used to make that easier? I know UIC said they remove some capacitors and whatnot. What were some strategies that made the timing and the triggering easier?
I mean, basically to UIUC's point about, basically brute forcing glitch offsets until they found the right parameters. Yeah, that's a very important step. We've found that if you adjust the glitch widths even slightly, it just ceases to work at all. So that's a very critical step. The capacitor removal, of course. Also, one technique we found useful is, you grab an oscilloscope and you compare very thoroughly that the place where the voltage is dropping is exactly the place where you expect it to be dropping, because the chip whisperer, as already previously discovered, has a very interesting API, and it often doesn't like to do what you want it to do. So always verifying that like the glitch is happening in the place you expect, on the edges you expect, on all that stuff, that all contributes immensely to making it more successful.
As a first-time participant, I'm really curious on how do you approach the CTF as a whole competition?
As a whole competition?
Yeah.
Like the team, or like?
Yeah, like how do you start solving challenges? How do you see other problems and everything?
Yeah, I mean, basically we just, so for design phase, the methodology is, well, we have a problem statement. We know that our goal is design a cryptographic protocol that fits that. So, you know, we spend a couple weeks fitting a protocol into the margins provided by the organizers. And then for there, it's, you know, normal team dispatch things of, well, we know what math we want to do and we know what features we need to implement. We do that. And so design phase is pretty straightforward. It's, you know, you have parameters, you do them. Attack phase, it's a little bit weirder. Attack phase, the way we do it is, so we have some like long-term, long shot things, which at the beginning of this attack phase, it was voltage fault injection was one of our long-term things. Turned out it became a very short-term thing very quickly. But so we had like a couple people that we dispatched to work on voltage fault injection, which we knew about because it's a not super uncommon hardware attack. I mean, it's certainly very specific, but it's not like it's not super rare in the world of hardware attacks. So we knew that it existed, and we knew that you could buy this chip whisperer thing to apparently do it. So we just had to put all of that stuff together. For the like shorter term attacks, well, we knew that the infra would have roughly this shape, and we knew that we wanted to do it quickly. So, you know, you just patch a couple people to, you know, do very easy and known attacks, like a lot of the pesky neighbor ones. You dispatch a team to do those very automatically. And then for everything in between, where it's a non-trivial amount of work and you got to, like, you know, read the crypto, you got to assess where all the bits are. That is just, I don't know, we're just on call basically at all times. It's, yeah, I don't know, the breadth of the question is very wide. So
also to add on that, if you're approaching this for the first time, be open to all number of possibilities, and be open to like approach those new type of attacks, new type of solutions with an open mind.
Oh, I forgot to ask. Hey, how many of you learned how to use an oscilloscope specifically? Sorry, in our team, learned how to use an oscilloscope specifically for this competition? Yeah. So like, we basically just, we have a problem. We need people to solve it. We don't know how to solve it yet. Figure out how to solve it. So it was like the 2 or 3 people on the team that had used an oscilloscope before, you know, basically giving, you know, full hour-and-a-half lectures on like, well, here's what all the knobs do. And, you know, like, it's just, you share around information until everyone is good enough to go.
And that was really helpful.
All right. Those are all the presentations, and now on to the thing we've all come for. So first, well, I guess I clicked forward twice, but for the first time this year, we had professionals who joined the eCTF in a trial run pro league. They were on a separate scoreboard, so you might not have noticed them. It was an attack phase only competition, so they were going after your designs. We had 3 participating teams this year. We had 3 participating teams, one of which was led by a former Carnegie Mellon alum, eCTF team. And we are super appreciative of all of their work that they put into it. They did a great job, and we're going to learn a lot from this so we can come back and hopefully bring it back even better next year. So if you're graduating and think your eCTF time is done, think again. You can still spend late nights or whatever free time you have hacking on eCTF. So without further ado, you already saw the 3 teams in 3rd place, Leak. In 2nd, Arrowhead Research, who were able to make it today. And in 1st, Concentric Codebreakers. Thank you. All right. So first, before getting to the places, we want to give 3 different special awards. And these are awards that are for different behaviors, achievements that we see fitting of giving a special recognition. So first is our special award for top high school. We've given this out a few years, and we are excited to give this to a first-year team that has done an incredible job. Without further ado, Mountain View High School. Right. Next, we want to give a special award to recognize the top community college in the competition. And that team is Community College, or City College of San Francisco. Next, we want to give a special award to a team that, despite losing flags relatively early, came back and kept fighting and kept attacking and kept scraping out those points, and ended up being, I believe, the 3rd or 4th highest attacking team, most flags captured. And that team is Brigham Young University. All right, to get to the fun part. So everything that is not yellow are the points that were awarded on the scoreboard that you can see right now. So this year was a defensive heavy competition with 183,000 defensive points accrued. There were 102,000 design phase flags, though note there were more teams in the design phase than the attack phase, and 91,558 offensive points. After the scoreboard was was closed, there were opportunities for teams who made it to the attack phase to earn additional points for their documentation. And additionally, there was a poster session where any team could present to get extra points. So at the close of the scoreboard, it was a very tight race. There was a 380 out of 16,000 points on the scoreboard. There is a 382 point difference between 2 through 4. I believe this is the closest race for the top 3 that we've ever seen. So these remaining points can be hugely impactful. Here is the attack phase. So, let's just zoom in a little bit. But there's some really interesting things here. There were a lot of teams who really participated in the eCTF and who did a lot of flag captures. This is a messy scoreboard. There's a lot of position changes. But I want to zoom into 2 special areas. So first, in the race for fifth, we had UIUC, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Indian Institute of Technology at Madras, University of California, Los Angeles, and Ohio State University. There was, between these four teams, 34 times that position changed during the attack phase. It was an incredibly scrappy race that was really fun to watch. Next was the race for third. So between Purdue, Community College of San Francisco, and Michigan, there were 25 position changes just between CCSF and Michigan alone. Like that race, there's two lines on the bottom there. Those are two teams that somehow managed to just constantly scrap it out. So without further ado, in third place with a $2,500 prize is University of Michigan. Thank you. In second place, with a prize of $5,000, is Purdue University. Thank you. And finally, before we announce the last team that I think most of us are aware of based on the past few slides, I just want to point out some impressive stats. So this year, biggest year ever, we had 245 flags in the attack phase. 95 of those flags went uncaptured. So the majority of the flags were captured. Of those, 9 teams defended all of their flags. So it was a tight team. Out of 50 teams, only 9 teams included, and those teams were advances: City College of San Francisco, Carnegie Mellon, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, MIT, Mountain View High School, again, the high school with perfect defense, incredible. University of Michigan, Ohio State University, Purdue, and University of California, Los Angeles. And then of the remaining flags that were captured, there were 150 Carnegie Mellon captured flags. Every flag that was captured in the entire competition, Carnegie Mellon managed to capture. And of those, Carnegie Mellon uniquely captured 41 of them. So the only flags that were ever captured by one team, every single one of them was by Carnegie Mellon. So without further ado, an incredibly dominant team this year. In first place with a prize of $10,000, Carnegie Mellon University. No, you know who they are. All right, so here are the final scores. You can see the final scores and position changes. There were another number of swaps, came down very tight in the end. Thank you to all teams. We can leave this up afterwards so you can get a picture, a closer picture. And we're frozen. But finally, I want to thank you all. And for some last few words, I want to, oh, there we go. I want to invite up Dan Walters. 10 years ago, Dan was the mastermind behind this whole eCTF. Started as a tiny little internal research project, even a year before I was involved, and I was sitting in that room. And now it has gone to grow up and be the competition that you all competed in. So, Dan.
Thank you. Good evening. That's hard to follow all the awesome talks that we just heard. So I'll try to be quick. But yeah, I did want to recap a little bit. It's crazy to think that it's been 10 years. And yeah, as Ben said, you know, when we started trying to figure out how to run a competition with real hardware, where having real hands-on the hardware was such an important component of it, the logistics of that, and that we were initially driving hardware out to schools to swap, right? Like they would design on one system, program it, we'd go pick it up and then like take it over to the other school. Obviously that wouldn't scale. So we figured it out, right? How to make it scale. But I'm just blown away by the talent that we see. I feel like just as much as the competition's grown up, the participants and the sophistication, the skills has also improved with it. And to me, that's just further evidence that the competition, not specifically this competition, but just competition in general, is such a key motivator for learning. And especially when, you know, it's fun and intense. The things that you guys do is pretty intense. I would say probably all of you tried a little bit harder, maybe stayed up a little bit later, you know, than what you would for some of your coursework, because you wanted to capture a flag, right? You wanted to score points for your team, and that's a pretty powerful thing. So we really believe in the model, and not just in its ability to affect learning directly, but also in trying to improve education more broadly. So, you know, that's been one of the goals of the competition, especially as we've grown bigger. You know, when we started, the goal was honestly recruit for MITRE. I wanted to recruit the talent, and you know, I would have killed for the talent that I see in this room today. I'm less violent now, so don't worry. But the goal now is not, because it's so big, recruit for MITRE, right? It's develop this workforce for the country. So it's much bigger than that. And the way that we're doing that, as I said, influencing education, we're seeing the improvements, you know, advisors designing new courses to teach material to better prepare specifically for this competition. We've seen that. We've seen advisors integrating the competition into their curriculum, using it as a capstone or something of that nature as a special topics course. And I think it's deserving of that, right? These are skills that are real. It brings a lot of things together. It's very interdisciplinary. A lot of universities are giving students college credit now. I hope all of you got college credit for it. You deserve it for all the time and effort. And advisors using it not just as a test of the students, but, you know, of how they're doing, of how they're teaching and how good their curriculum is improving, the general skills and preparing you all for being able to do this very real world challenge. Finally, also seeing advisors look and share best practices about what others are doing and learning from each other. So the advisors that are in the room today or listening online, I highly suggest, if you aren't doing all those things that I just mentioned, start doing them. Think about that, because I think that there's a big opportunity here. For students, my recommendations to you is build your club and build your pipeline, right? I think what we saw today is that the teams that did very, very well are the ones that have a pipeline and they have sort of a support infrastructure in place. Today I learned that the cool kids call that infra. So, but I'm not just talking about the hardware setups and the things that you can reuse each year, but also that sort of community in teaching the younger students, recruiting younger students into your club, and really creating a community around it. That's how you get better at this. For the students that are graduating, go back, help your alma mater. Right? There's nothing to say in the rules, at least, that you can't do that. So have some school spirit, some community spirit. Go back and help. If you don't know what you're doing after graduation, where you're working at, maybe go talk to our sponsors. They probably want to hire you. And if you don't know where you're working at and it's not one of our sponsors, maybe you can help your future employer become a new sponsor of the eCTF too. So tell your companies, this isn't an event that's easy to run. So we really appreciate the support. And of course, as Ben already alluded to, this is the first time that we did the Pro League. We'd like to see that continue. So talk to your companies about joining the Pro League. Finally, you're all officially a member of the elite group of eCTF alumni now. So join our LinkedIn group for that. It's one of our simple ways that we try to keep people connected together. I think we've got there we go, QR code for that. So join the group, stay connected with the community, and then go out and make the digital and physical world a better, safer place, a more secure place. I have a few people I need to thank before I leave you. I know you guys want to go and mingle and talk more, but I need to thank the whole team. I mean, there's a lot of people that make this possible. Some of them you see, some of them you don't see behind the scenes. But obviously, Ben Janis, thank you very much to Ben. I feel like I need to just pause to clap for Ben. But also, his team, Lisa Payton, Sam Myers. We got help from Jake Arcel, Brandon McEntee, thank you. Sylvia DeLay is here, AJ Victoria. Sorry, I know I'm going through them fast, but there's a lot of them. Sam Cooper, Ty Hallmark, Jess Dooley, Mackenzie. Thank you for our senior support from Doug Robbins, Moise Solomon, Katie Enos, Christine Carlson. And also thank you. There are some people who sadly couldn't be here today, but their fingerprints are all over this, and we couldn't have done it without them. Nikki Konis, Casey, and Jackie Murphy. So thank you. Thank you to our sponsors as well. Again, round of applause for our sponsors. CrowdStrike, Rolls-Royce, Sysdig, Fortinet, BCI, and Analog, and of course our partners and sponsors, the Northeast Microelectronics Coalition, and their booth is here. Please go check them out. And our gracious host today, Tufts. I probably forgot somebody, so I apologize. And I'm going to leave you now. Finally, this is the last thing I swear, with a poem. And I'm not a poet, but I have ChatGPT on my phone. And you all put a lot of stuff out on the internet about this, so I didn't even really need to tell it much. So here we go. So in eCTF's relentless race, teams built their systems braced in place. Defenses strong, encryption tight, but left a beacon LED light. A blinking bulb, a harmless sign, to seasoned eyes, a faulted line. Timing told a secret tale, a side channel through which attacks prevail. An attacker waits, observes the flash, infers the state, prepares to smash. A voltage glitch, a perfect beat, and suddenly the lock's defeat. The lesson's clear in red and green. What's visible betrays the unseen. Security's not just code or key, it's knowing what your foes might see. So guard your lights, suppress their clue, and mind your UART edges too, or eCTF will humble you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So I'll leave you on that. The winning teams, please stay in your seats after we break. We want to get some more photos. Then otherwise, of course, the last slide. And it's done. It's done. Okay, it's done. Thank you.